Hand tracking is a type of input that uses cameras on the outside of the headset to track hands and gestures in the real world, and then translates that to an interaction in the digital world. This is great because you don't have to worry about constantly changing controller batteries, and it's a much more immersive way to interact with virtual worlds and digital spaces since you don't need to use controllers. There are two types of hand tracking interactions: direct manipulation and gestures. Direct manipulation lets you interact with digital objects the way you would in real life, by directly picking up objects or touching UI panels, whereas gestures require you to form shapes with your hands to interact with the environment. For example, if you need to teleport or move around in the environment without a controller, you would form a gesture to do so. Regardless of which type you use, either direct or gesture, there are some limitations that you'll need to be aware of as a designer. The capabilities and visual range of the cameras vary from headset to headset, so you'll need to know as early as possible which headset you're designing your experience for, so you can take that into account in your designs. For example, regardless of the headset, your hands need to be in the line of sight of the camera or the sensor for it to work. So depending on which headset you have, how the cameras are placed, and the visual range of the camera will affect how well hand tracking works on that headset. You'll notice that none of these headsets have cameras on the back, behind the head. That means that any interactions that require you to move your hand behind your back, behind the headset, won't be picked up by the cameras on the headset. That's the benefit of controllers over hand tracking, at least for now. Another thing to keep in mind is that holding your hands out far enough to be picked up by the cameras or sensors can cause physical fatigue. This is also known as gorilla arm. That's because your arms get heavier and heavier the longer you hold them up. And this gets even harder for people with shorter arms or smaller hands, or for people with motor function impairments like frozen shoulder. So keep that in mind when you're designing your environment and the types of interactions you're wanting people to use in your experience. And make sure any longer duration interactions are within physical comfort zones. These are just like they'd be in real life ergonomic best practices. And for objects that are further away, try using digital grabbers or other extender tools or interactions. And this is where a gesture type interaction could come in handy. While you can do some pretty cool things with gestures, this is a less intuitive and immersive way of interacting with digital space. That's because they require you to memorize hand shapes to interact with the environment. Think about smartphones. When they first came out, the gestures were pretty simple and easy to remember. But then over time, more and more gestures were added. And it's getting more and more complicated to keep track of how many fingers you need to do what in which direction. This causes cognitive overload, which then causes frustration. So try to minimize the amount of formed gestures used or required in your experiences, and make sure when you use them, it's for a good reason. Also use tooltips and memory cues to remind people how to use any gestures. And try to avoid using overly complicated gestures that people will have to memorize, unless of course it's part of your experience. Depending on the headset and cameras, you may not be able to overlap your hands. They'll obscure each other and disappear. So keep this in mind when deciding which headset to use and which gestures you're using in your experience. And finally, there's no sense of touch or tactile feel to give haptic feedback when you're using hand tracking. Since those senses aren't available, you can make up for it by giving visual feedback such as glows or highlights, along with subtle audio so that people know when an object is being touched or manipulated. I highly encourage you to grab a headset and check out hand tracking for yourselves. You can click on the link right now to learn more about input methods for XR. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one.